Hi, I'm Michael Killen. This is another episode of Search for Critical Solutions that can stop climate change. On this show, I have invited Janelle London. She is the co-executive director of Cultura, and maybe I can get that exactly correct. And I'm going to ask her about her organization's mission, which has something to do with removing oil from the transportation sector. And then my second guest is Ray Mueller, who is Robert Mueller's son. And he is also, but it's a different Robert Mueller, and he is the mayor of Menlo Park. Janelle, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Am I correct? The mission of your nonprofit is to help develop policies to remove gasoline from the transportation sector. Why the problem with gasoline?
Well, the mission is to accelerate the transition away from gasoline to cleaner alternatives. And the reason is that gasoline is the single biggest source of carbon emissions coming from human activities. So, for instance, in California, it is the vast majority of the source of our carbon emissions. It's 41% of our total carbon emissions from various economic sectors. And the vast majority of that is coming from our cars and trucks.
Okay, so you just quoted some numbers for the state of California. Maybe the team, I have 50 people behind these cameras, maybe they could bring up the slide that has those statistics for California. But what about the entire United States? What percentage of greenhouse gases is emitted from the transportation sector?
Yeah, so in the whole U.S., also, transportation is the biggest sector for carbon emissions at 29% of the total. And again, our cars and trucks are the single biggest portion of that at 60% of the total.
Okay. Now, your mission is to help develop, promote policies, I guess across the United States?
Yes.
That in various ways helps reduce gasoline and diesel, I guess.
Yes.
And what are some of those policies that your organization encourages? Maybe you could give me one, two, or three of them.
Sure. I can. There's two major ones that we're focusing on. So the first one is at the state level, and we're focusing on two states right now, California and Washington State. And the policy is called a gasoline phase-out, a gasoline vehicle phase-out. And what that means is when you would go to buy a car, let's say in 2030, buy a new car, it just wouldn't be a gasoline-powered car. It would be a car powered by no emissions, a cleaner alternative, probably an electric vehicle.
Okay, that's one of the goals that's part of your strategy. And let's see, you picked two states that are somewhat of a leader in trying to do something with climate change, California and Washington State. And do you have another policy that you're trying to support, encourage widespread acceptance?
Yes. So while states are an excellent place to start with this kind of policy to phase out gasoline sales, there's also a lot of opportunity at the city level to really make a difference on reducing gasoline use. And one of the first policies that a city can enact is to require that all its public vehicles, its city vehicles, no longer be gasoline vehicles. With cities' vehicles, they have very predictable use patterns. They can charge every night. There's no reason any city's passenger vehicles their new vehicles should ever be gasoline vehicles again, starting even now.
All right, you brought up local communities, cities, and we have a mayor here, the mayor of Menlo Park, and I'd like to ask Ray, you run that city, don't you? You and the manager of the city.
Right.
What have you and the government of Menlo Park done to try to help promote less gasoline in the transportation sector?
Yeah, so it really comes down to actions and then making programmatic decisions. And so action-wise, in the city of Menlo Park, we have started to embark on replacing our fleet of vehicles. I think right now we have just slightly over 10% of our vehicles are electric vehicles. We've put in the charging stations at City Hall to go ahead and get that done, and we've looked for opportunities to increase that. And actually, frankly, been pushing and really trying. For instance, this year we wanted to try to make that transition for our police vehicle fleet. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that yet, but we really tried to reach out and let those manufacturers know it's time. We want those. We would have purchased those vehicles if they had been available. The other things that we've done is we've really, one of the things, if you want people to switch over to electric vehicles, you need to have the infrastructure for it. And so what we've required is in our multifamily unit housing, for every single one of those units that is put in, that there be an electric vehicle charging station for that unit. We've pushed to get actually electrical supercharging stations put in at various points within the city. And we're continuing to try to push that, to try to figure out how can we go ahead and get that infrastructure in place so that people can make that transition. And those are concrete examples. But then programmatically, what we've done is we've really tried to empower. It's similar to if you were the CEO of a company, you go out and you find the very best and brightest to go ahead and sit on city commissions, to put together thought tanks, and then you empower them to push the city, to push you to do more. And I can't emphasize enough how critical that is, because as someone in a leadership position in the city, I'm cognizant of the fact that I may not be there tomorrow. But programmatically, if I put together a system where the right people are, and they're constantly replaced, and they're constantly pushing that city, then I know after I'm gone, those who sit in those policy chairs later on will still have that taking place. And then we've worked real hard to put together plans in order to make sure that we put together systematic plans coming out of those thought tank commissions.
So putting an infrastructure in place to support electric cars, buses, and vehicles, that is really a fundamental thrust of the city of Menlo Park. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's a good one, and I've seen some charging stations near the park, near the police station, and that's the main place, though, where the charges are. So
we actually have been pushed to actually get them also into our commercial center. So up in Sharon Heights right now, we worked with Tesla to get supercharging stations put in there behind Starbucks, and we're looking for other opportunity zones like that. I was just talking with Janelle beforehand. And really the very next step is to go ahead and to put in signage to tell people, similar, if anyone's ever driven the freeway, going down the freeway, everyone knows where the next gas station is. There's signs telling you where that gas station is. To have those same types of signs internally to the city and externally in the city works twofold. One, they let you know where to charge your car, but two, they tell people there's infrastructure here for you to make this decision.
Sure. So do you envision putting signage on 101?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we need to do that, and I think we need to put it internally in the city so that people know. So I think one of the, psychologically, when you go to make that purchase of an electric vehicle, one of the questions you ask yourself is, will I be able to charge it?
Yes, and I think we have a slide that Janelle provided us of, charging stations around the state, I guess. Maybe we could see that slide. If not, Janelle, you listened clearly to what he said. What do you feel is the most important goals or initiatives that he just mentioned?
Well, I think he's exactly right that especially in multi-unit dwellings, people need a place to charge their car overnight. It can be as simple as an electrical outlet, a 120-volt regular old plug, but it needs to be where they park their cars. That alone would give them about 40, 50 miles of charge a night.
So it's building the infrastructure in the multi-family, multi-dwelling buildings. And you mentioned, you brought this. What is that?
Yes. So a lot of people don't know that when you get an electric car, it actually comes with a plug. And so here's the end of it. This end plugs into your car, and this end plugs into a regular wall electrical outlet. So from the minute you bring your car home, you can charge it.
Interesting. Okay, so I don't have to hire an electrician to come and give me a higher level voltage or amps, no?
For many people, this is enough. If you have a commute that's, say, 30 miles a day, you could get by easily with just your overnight plugging it into the wall.
Okay. I have a question. I live in Menlo Park also, all right? I have to almost every month drive up to San Rafael, actually a little farther. That's a city, as you know, on the other side of the Golden Gate. If I bought an electric car, or somebody else did, would I be able to drive all the way up to San Rafael or further and then back without having to worry about running out of electricity?
Absolutely. So most new electric vehicles today have ranges of 200, 250, even 300 miles. And as technology improves, that range is only getting greater. So that round trip to San Rafael is 100 miles. You could easily make it.
If I want to know where charging stations are along the way, can I get on the internet and find them?
Yes, you can. So there's an app called the Plug Share app that all EV owners know about. And it tells you where the charging stations are and which ones are available and how fast the charging is.
I think what keeps a lot of people from going out and buying or leasing an EV is costs. What does it cost? What are some of the deals that are out there? What are some of the rebates from governments? Could you put some of that into perspective that help
Sure.
our viewers know how to go about getting the rebates and what exists and what doesn't
Sure.
exist?
So one thing people need to know is it's actually cheaper to own an electric vehicle than it is to have a similar gas car already.
What's a similar gas car?
Well, a recent study came out that showed that a Tesla Model 3, which is an electric car, is cheaper to own for 5 years than a Toyota Camry.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that car. I almost bought one once. It really is cheaper, and this has something to do with you don't have to buy so much gas or any gas. Is that it?
That's right. The fuel costs are much cheaper. There's almost no maintenance on an electric vehicle. It has about 20 parts versus 2,000 parts on a gasoline vehicle, so very few parts to break down. And the Model 3 holds its resale value much better than the Camry.
Oh, interesting. What are some of the other drawbacks that keep people from embracing electric vehicles as much as you would like them to embrace?
Well, I think there's a real myth out there that they're more expensive, and it's just not true. So especially with leasing an electric vehicle, there are some great lease deals out there, and they're all across the country. And in many cases, you can lease an electric vehicle for $5 to $10 a day.
Give me a specific example if you can.
Sure, I'll tell you about my car.
Okay.
So I have a Kia Soul EV.
A key. Say the name again.
Kia Soul EV.
Yeah.
That's an electric vehicle. It gets about 140 miles per charge, and we're paying $139 a month.
$139 a month on your lease payment.
Yes.
And normally you might be spending about $25, $30 a month on gas.
We pay very little. I mean, it's, well, so my husband's able to get to charge the car when we're at his workplace. And when we're not doing that, we just plug it in at night and wake up the next morning and we have a full charge.
How much gasoline do you save, money do you save every month, roughly? Okay, it's all right.
Maybe 40, 50, 100 bucks. I have no idea. I don't
Okay.
have to worry about it anymore.
So you just told us the monthly lease payment. What was the down payment?
So the down payment was $3,000, and we got all of that back. So the state of California writes you a check for $2,500.
You're kidding.
Nope, I'm serious. And Pacific Gas and Electric, which is our utility, wrote us a check for $500.
So you got $3,000 back, which matched the down payment.
That's right.
That's painless.
Yes, yes.
And then you just have to be concerned with the monthly payments, which is not an awful lot. And that's even less when we add in how much you're saving from not having to buy gasoline, and maybe also there's some maintenance, less maintenance. Is that right?
Yes, there's no oil changes, there's no spark plugs, nothing to break down. The only maintenance is rotating your tires.
Okay, so if I wanted to look for more leasing deals, where do I go?
There is a fabulous website called, it's a complicated URL, but it's ev-vin.blogspot.com.
All right, for our audiences, have your pencils ready. Would you say that again, please?
www.ev-vin.blogspot.com.
Is there also a website to go to discover how much, in this particular case, California will give you a rebate or whatever? And are there out?
Yes.
What would that be?
Well, the site I recommend is ours, cultura.org, and we have a whole section on EV affordability.
Okay, very good. And I'd like to go back to Ray for a moment. Now, Ray, you spoke about positive things that the city is doing, building an infrastructure, and I also like that you talked about bringing in people that are really passionate and are talented to try to make things happen. That's wonderful.
Like Chanel. She serves on our Environmental Quality Commission.
Oh, really?
It's true.
Yeah.
But are you or maybe you could speak about some negative approaches, cities, states, countries, steps they're taking to help encourage us, maybe not even to buy a car, but certainly not to have an electric vehicle, like, for example, shutting down all of downtown in maybe London, whatever downtown is in London, and not permitting gas cars. And then there's some countries, I think, that have said by a certain year, we won't let any gas cars be on the street. But maybe you have some specific examples about what's happening with other countries, states, or cities that you'd like to share to discourage the use of gas cars. And then I'll ask Janelle to add to that.
You know, it's funny, I don't necessarily, and maybe I should, but I don't necessarily think of it as trying to discourage the use of a gas vehicle, but rather encourage an alternative use. And so, you know, one of the things that you see happening here locally more and more, and which we did in Menlo Park, was we're replacing parking spaces with bike lanes. And it's things like that, where what you're doing is you're basically, so, and I can tell you as a result of that, like in terms of myself, I've reduced my personal driving of a vehicle by about 40% on single vehicle trips, instead riding my bike.
Well, really? So you ride your bike to Stanford? I think you have your day job?
I ride my bike, and I ride my bike to, this morning I had an event down in Bellhaven on the other side of town, rode my bike there. If I have a single vehicle trip, I ride my bike, and I've gotten used to doing that. And it's amazing how many single vehicle trips, single occupancy in that vehicle trips add up if you're looking at a distance like that. For this year, for Father's Day, my wife gave me a basket for the bike so I can go grocery shopping.
It was nice of her.
Yeah, it was great. And they all thought it was a great present, and I love it. But it's little things like that actually, that as you do that, you encourage people to go ahead and seek out that alternative route. And so one of the things that we're looking at now is there a way that we can work with our gas stations to try to figure out how we get EV chargers actually into those stations and start that transition. But I don't, you know, it's every time you take a step like that, there are certainly people who get who come out and are concerned about that. So yeah, it does take political courage, and the way you deal with that is you build up that group of thought leaders. You find that group of stakeholders in your city who are supportive of that, and you empower them to share those stories. And it was funny. I was talking with a person when we went and took away the parking along Santa Cruz. We put in sidewalks and bike lanes. I had a longtime resident who I play basketball with on Saturday mornings. He told me at the time we were doing it, he thought we were crazy. He said, people are going to hate this, you're crazy, it's political suicide. A year later, he came to me and he said, my brother and I walk that sidewalk every week, and it was the smartest thing he ever did, and I was wrong. And so.
Okay. So one of the things the city has done that sort of discourages, but we see it in a positive way, the use of cars, the positive, get rid of parking spaces and replace them with bike lanes and encourage people to use their bikes for short trips, right? Do you see some other ways that cities, states are doing things or could do things that, again, I would look at it a little bit negative, to really encourage you to get out of your car and either get on a bike or a train or into an EV? Do you see some other things happening around the world?
I do. I think given the urgency of the climate crisis, we need to have certainty that we are going to get off gasoline and make that transition in a very short time. One of the primary examples that I hold out is Norway. That country is not going to sell any more gasoline vehicles after 2025. Already, their new car sales, more than half are electric vehicles. And they've managed to do this by incentivizing it. They, first of all, they've put chargers everywhere. There has to be plenty of charging. And then they do not tax electric vehicles, and they tax the heck out of gasoline ones. So they're tipping the balance and making it more attractive to go electric.
What about India? Are they doing something like
India's
that?
working on it. They have a lot of two-wheeled and three-wheeled vehicles, and so they are working to electrify their three-wheeled kind of tuk-tuk vehicles.
Did you want to add something here?
Well, I speak as a local elected. So locals, my hands are kind of tied against things like that. But one of the things you see taking place in California on this is gasoline taxes. I mean, typically the way that you see this implemented here in the States is you'll add a tax to the use of that vehicle, and to go ahead and you'll use that for some sort of alternative transit, or you'll offset rebates for electric vehicles. And typically that's what we see at the state level. The other thing we do, frankly, in California is I take very valuable parking spaces away from your standard vehicle and give it to an electric vehicle charging station.
Okay.
So.
Now, one of your colleagues, Pat Burt, who was the mayor of Palo Alto.
I respect him immensely. Pat's a great public servant.
Good. He likes you too.
Yeah.
Really. Pat, at an event I was at, said something about getting rid of the parking spaces. He says, well, do you have any idea what it costs the city of Palo Alto to have parking spaces? If we can get people out of their cars on bikes and scooters, we don't have to spend so much money on building these buildings with parking spaces.
Yeah.
Anything. Now, I want to ask, what do you think of, are we going to get to the point, well, first of all, what's the United States government doing to encourage people to get into electric vehicles?
Well, that's a
and get out
loaded
of
question.
oil?
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, under the current administration, we're actually moving backwards on electrifying our vehicles and stopping using gasoline. But at the state level and city level, we're seeing some real progress that I think will ultimately pave the way for when we have a new administration quickly accelerating this transition to electric vehicles.
What do you think about the fact that in France, Macron pushed forward a tax on gasoline, and the country almost had another Bastille Day? You know, the Greens and a lot of other folks rose up, picketed, and forced the country, I believe, to back away from the tax. What do you think of that? Gasoline tax for?
Yeah, so me personally, every time you take an action like that, it's all about doing the groundwork in advance. So if you're going to take a big step, what you need to do is talk to your constituency about that, prepare them for that, get them on board with that the best that you can, and then you take the leap, and then you be prepared to defend that. So, but for those who are rising up against it, obviously they don't see the climate threat as the existential crisis that it is. And so at the end of the day, but I think it's also fair to say that they don't see it to the extent it is, but also the people who rose up against it, a lot of those people were out of work, unemployed, and had other issues that were confounding. And so if you're going to do something like that, you still have to also make sure that you would address the root of the problem. The root of the problem there wasn't the tax on the gasoline. The root problem there is the unemployment figures in
Sure.
France.
Sure.
And so how do you go ahead and help that constituency? So,
Okay. By the way, the big environmental firms like the Sierra Club 350, the Greens, are they pushing to get us out of the dirty cars, which I think you relate to smoking like cigarettes that give us cancer? And are they encouraging getting into the EVs?
Yes, absolutely. So we actually are in a coalition with them. We're leading this coalition of some of the major environmental and health organizations and growing that coalition. And they are very much on board with this. It's not their principal focus. They have many areas of focus, but for us it is the main and only focus. But they are on board.
What do you think about them?
I think they're amazing. So yeah, we are very lucky to live in a county with, our two counties, San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, where we have as many environmentally focused nonprofits helping to push really good thought leadership on that.
Now, San Mateo is one of the counties in the world that has called it a climate crisis that we face. Mm-hmm. Will you do that in Menlo Park?
So we are going to come out and call it a climate crisis, but I would point out that earlier this year we actually on Earth Day put forth a very strong resolution. We didn't call it we didn't use that verbiage, but we adopted a measure saying by 2030 we expect to be carbon neutral.
Okay, good. We're out of time. Just 1 second. Hi, again, I'm Michael Killen, and in Menlo Park on December the 3rd at Art Ventures Gallery, that organization will present a retrospective of the work of artist Harry Cohen, who passed recently. And Harry Cohen is clearly one of California's greatest artists. Art Venture Gallery, December the 3rd starts the event. I have the task of playing curator of that event, but I hope to see you. And I'm going to invite both of these guests to be kind and come to the event and share their thoughts with the audience. Again, I'm Michael Killen. My guest is Ray Mueller and Janelle London. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Just stay a little while.